Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Williams, and I'm the Library Services Coordinator for the Copper Queen Library. And I am so thrilled to have Carlos Valenzuela back with us with his newest book, which is also a sequel or prequel, which is it, to Camaleon, or Two Letters from Young Carlos. And the book title of the new book is Camaleon. And I'm just so excited, not just for this new book, Carlos, but to have you here with us and to talk about the progression of this new work and how the characters from the previous work are expanding and we're finding out more. So thank you everybody for joining us, and Carlos, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always an honor, and I know this sounds like something nice to say, but I honestly tell you that for me, it's a deep honor to be invited to talk about your work. It is really an honor, and like we said, Allison, the best part of it comes from the audience, because I think they are the most interesting. If ever I have a chance to speak to an audience, if I'm live, if I'm doing a book signing, the most interesting comments come from the audience. I mean, sometimes they'll come up, and as I sign the book, they'll whisper something in my ear, and I'm like, wait a minute, tell me more about that. Or they will catch me in the hallway on the way to the restroom. Hopefully, I always wish for it to be on the way back, and they will ask questions. So if you have questions, both Allison and I love them. And this information that I have on my work and and the thought process and how I went about it and what the characters do and why is really all about you. So hopefully, you will have something to comment on or ask me about. But thank you very much, Allison, for asking me.
I'm so happy you're here with us. Thank you.
I think I'd like to talk to you at first, usually on my little book tour. The book has only been out for a month on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and at other bookstores. It's available also. But primarily, as those of you that are into books know, that Amazon is the big Gargonaut. It's that's where it's all happening, and we have some nice reviews on there from people that read the book. And but the book has been out for a month, so it's always interesting to see how people receive it. But because we're so new to the comments, I thought I would tell you this morning or this afternoon a little bit more about the process and why, because that's been a comment that comes through in the messages I get. I am fairly active on Facebook and Instagram, and the book itself has a way to get a hold of me, and people do all the time send me comments and questions. And one of the questions is, because Camaleon deals a lot with gender identification and gender fluidity, people ask me what, especially when they read the finale, which I will not tell you because it is very surprising. People ask me all the time, what is it? Why, how did you choose this topic of gender fluidity, of gender? And a lot of people still believe, and we may have some today or some that watch this later, that gender is binary, meaning there's only two, male and female. And that is not so, as you know. It is just not so. I came up with it because ever since I was very young, I had this suspicion and this idea that there were men in my life as a young gay, who were flirting with me. And maybe it was wishful thinking, I thought at the beginning, but then as time went by, I confirmed it, that these men that were straight were more than romantic. And I think everyone here today or viewing it later is going to probably be able to remember someone at a time in their lives when they had this flirtation, coquettish relationship with someone that you felt they might like you, and you felt you might like them, but nothing ever happened. And the proof was in the pudding, because their behavior was very different when they were with a lot of people with you, or when you were alone, when you were walking down the hallway all by yourselves, or sitting alone. It was very, very different. And I always had this doubt. And these men that flirted, I thought, with me, had girlfriends. Some of them were married. And I forever had that doubt of saying, am I just a cockeyed optimist thinking that these people find me interesting, or is it actually happening? Well, fast forward many, many, many years and my experience and coming out and everything, and I started researching what we call gender identity and gender fluidity. And of course, right now it is a very hot topic. And I'm not an expert on it. I don't want to even pretend I am. I am not a behavioral psychologist or anything like that, but I read a tremendous amount. And I studied as much as I could about it. I spoke to psychologists. I even spoke with 2 doctors, because I wanted to know exactly what the statistics meant about so many people being in this gamma, this whole rainbow of gender identities. And that is basically the topic or the theme around which young Carlos, that you met in Letters to Young Carlos, starts developing himself. He leaves his hometown because he's banished by his father, and goes to a boarding school in Los Angeles, where his only boyfriend he ever had happened to live. He wasn't dumb. He knew where he was going, and he starts looking for him, and he finds him. And that was Jesse. For those of you that read the book, you know and remember Jesse. And he finds him, and many things happen that I will not explain because I will give away parts of the book. And throughout the entire book, Carlos meets an array of characters that are all across the spectrum of gender identity. He, of course, meets eventually gay men, primarily men. There's one question that I had, is that why are there no lesbians or no women? Well, because it was 1960 and the 1960s. And I do not recall, through all of the 60s and up to my 21, 22 maybe, when I think I became aware that there were groups of women who were also, I mean, I knew they were, but they weren't obvious because they too were shamed into the closet in 1960. So I saw women that maybe could have been gay or lesbian, but I wasn't sure. And like everything else, I couldn't go up to them. So there's a total absence of that, but there's not an absence of women, because Blanca, the mother, Bonita, the sister, and a new character, Madeline, who develops a crush on Carlos in the book, are all very prominent. So there are women. I wasn't able to include lesbians because they were not around for the character at that time. So he does meet a lot of people throughout. He meets bisexual people. He meets a woman, a young man who was born a woman or a trans, and one of the leading supporting characters of this story is a character called Renee, who is a student and is a drag queen performer in the evenings. And he makes a major transition toward the end of the book. And he has a little scene and a dialogue, which has become quoted by a couple of people because it's actually brilliant what he says. And so Carlos is introduced to gender fluidity with the appearance of a parade of characters all the way through, including the false gay person, which you will remember when you read the book, a character whose name was David. Toward the middle and the end of the book, he becomes very prominent. And David pretends to be gay because he wants something from Carlos. And I think also everyone who is gay or who has been in love or been in the dating circuit has probably come across the false boyfriend or girlfriend, the one that says, I'm not really in love with this person. I don't really feel that much for them, but boy, is he or she convenient. So I'm going to play along. So that character is also there through the book. And so there are a lot of characters that do that. So one of the reasons why Camaleon the book is called Camaleon or Chameleon, is because Carlos was basically still in the closet. At least he wasn't in the closet for himself. He knew he was gay, but it was too scary to come out, to do anything. And he had the urgency of making it because he couldn't go back home. His father had banished him. There was nothing waiting for him at home. And he was alone and pretty alone. And therefore, anything that could be a threat to him finding a job and being secure, finding some kind of security was not a go. So he goes to school in high school in Los Angeles, and then he goes to college in San Francisco, which is a really colorful section of the book because I happen to have lived in San Francisco at that time, and I recall a lot of the. I think many of you, this is going to go right over your heads, but it was flower power and a lot of smoking and a lot of hippies. And that was the era in which he moves there. And I tried to describe it as much as possible, the habits, the customs, the parties, and the music. All of that is part of this ensemble. And so he goes to San Francisco and he manages to get a degree. He has many stumbling blocks because of the fact that he wants to to keep it to himself, who he is. And the reason the book is called Camaleon is because you can tell a chameleon is a reptile that changes color, has this protective coloration to fit the situation. And very much so, the main character in the book has this need to just, according to whatever's going on, he tries to fit in there. And according to this over here, he'll fit over there and he'll change over here. So he's a chameleon. And he is all over the place. And, you know, the essence of the book is that a person who is not really themselves eventually unravels. It's very difficult to sustain that character that you present because it's not you. And to top it off, one of the things that happens is that that character that you created could be very amicable, could be usually very nice and tried to be liked and popular. So he develops lots of relationships, lots of friends, and maybe somebody even falls in love with them. Then the onus is on that person, or in this case, the character, to keep that going. And that is where the drama of the book is, because it is, of course, very, very difficult to do that. It's impossible. And the character unravels because if you try to be someone else, your true self is gonna have to come out. I'll tell you a very brief digression because it is so true. Before I was writing 100%, I was a beauty consultant and I was a hairdresser and I trained people and I was a spokesperson for beauty products and traveled all around the world and did these things when I was young and beautiful, no more. And one of the things that I did was I had a line of custom blend makeup. And custom blend makeup is, most of you know, it's not like the little bottle that you buy in the store. This is like going to Sherwin-Williams, but for makeup, and they blend something for you. And I'll tell you, if you can afford it, that's the way to go. I think right now it's like $120 or $130 for a little bottle, but it is made specifically for you, and that's the makeup. So what does this have to do with Camaleon? Occasionally, I would get a client who would come in and say, kind of whisper to me, you know, I would like to have my skin look a little lighter. And okay, I'd say, you know, and this was not somebody who like was African-American and wanted to look, no. This is like somebody who was cappuccino colored and wanted to look pale white for some reason. That's how they saw themselves. And I would tell them, you know, if I do this, I can do this foundation for you, but it's not your true derma. When you put this on, you're going to look like you want to, but within a couple of hours of you wearing it, your true color is going to start shining through. You can't help it. And that's going to kind of blend and mix up with the lighter shade, and it's not going to look good. The best thing, just like being who you are, is wear the shade that belongs to you, and you are going to look outstanding. And that's what happens when somebody is pretending to be someone else. You know, you eventually unravel because of the fact that you have needs as the person you're not. The person you're not and the person that you are hiding needs intimacy, and not just sexual or physical. They need to sit with someone that they trust and talk and share their hearts and talk about the crush that they have or the disappointing moment that they had last week, being their true selves. And they have the need to be held, to be kissed, and to be loved. And it is during these moments, as you see in the book, in the novel, that it all begins to unravel. Because how can you stop yourself from wanting to be loved? You just can't. You want to be loved, especially when you're young. So the main character builds relationships with all these different characters, some of them intimate, some of them friendly, as someone else. And as they say, they all come home to roost at one point. And that's where the big battle of the novel happens. So Camaleons is a book that I believe talks not just about a come from behind victory. It talks about the need to be who you are and the consequences of not being who you are. And granted, I think we all are a little hypocritical, even when we are who we are. I mean, come on, you are in a networking meeting and you happen to be right next to somebody who just irritates you terribly. You cannot just tell them where to go. You have to be someone else, and you have to be a good person, take the high road, hopefully. And we all have those moments, but it's not about who you are. It's about a moment. And like I said, the difficulty is that all of these relationships are unsustainable. The main character has a young lady who falls in love with him in the book. And I mean, I think I've already heard from all the gay men that said, "Oh my God, I had that happen to me." And when you were describing that, I thought it was me who was there. and that happens to many of us. But I think the book in the end is about being honest with yourself, about coming to terms with it. But I also think it's about forgiveness. Because, it's nobody gave you or me or Allison or Pam or everybody who's on here a handbook on this is how what you should do when this happens, because this is going to be tough, so do this. We just made it up, and I think we made it up well, and you just do the best you can. I wonder if we have any questions, Allison.
Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or comments at this point? Feel free to type it in as well. I think it's just a really interesting exploration of identity and also personal space of how we move through life. Um, and I think um, how we are defined by others and how what courage it takes to redefine or to find your own definition of your own personhood. And I really love Gen Z. I'm the parent of a Gen Zer, and they've created their own language beyond pronouns, beyond gender fluidity. They have so many, I told my teen in the 80s, uh, most people said, gay, straight, or bi. Like that bi was the, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
um, that's so archaic for this new generation. They have so many new concepts, so that's what I love, is a new language, new words. The words are ideas, the words are names, they're naming themselves, they're giving
yes,
themselves the space to be simply who they are and also who they want to be in a very differently faceted world. It's not it's not binary, right? That's what's amazing. Binary, zeros
right.
and ones, how we write code. So it's really expansive. So
And I also think, Allison, that besides the fact that I just made the allegory of saying that, nobody gave us a handbook for living, really. I mean, we had some guidelines, in some cases, religion, in some cases, our parents had rules or whatever it was. But when it came down to the nitty gritty, we were on our own all the time, and I think we did the best we could. And there is a premise also in the book, which is explored right at the beginning, that you are either born um, privileged in many ways, whether it be with looks or money, or and you grow up enjoying that entitlement, and this is not any kind of a criticism of somebody who is privileged and enjoys their life. No, but what I'm trying to say is you are either born, not become, born into that, or you are born into a world in which you do not belong. And therefore, you need to immediately sort out the fact that you are in a strange world and become a chameleon immediately in order to try to look like that person that belongs. And I see this not just with the gay situation. I had a long discussion 2 days ago. Somebody who we discussed fat shaming. And I mean, of course I knew about it, but I was not aware how profound and how rampant this is, that people who have extra pounds go through the same thing that gay people went through almost. And I mean, it's not like they can pretend really they're not. And we go on and on and on and on. So in some ways, the principles that you see in Camaleon and the struggle that you see with the main character and some of the supporting characters are universal, very universal. I wish this wasn't true, but it is very true for that. And the characters will take you by the hand and escort you into their lives. I tried to create the characters so they were approachable, so that somebody reading could say, okay, I don't like this character, but I can see where they're coming from. And I don't even agree with what they're doing, but I kind of get it, why they are that way. And that to me is groundbreaking, because you do not have to understand someone to love them.
I think, Carlos, that's part of the skill, your skill as a writer, your skill with language and a voice that that sometimes we read to be transported to something completely unknown to us. You know, new lands, new people, new stories. Fantasy and science fiction does that for me. I love world building novels that create entire universes. But while you create these individuals, you are also giving voice to the universal um, realm of us as humans, right? You're
Yeah.
finding those circles of commonality, and that's magical too, because that's the voice that you give. I was wondering if you would read a little bit, a preview for us.
Yes, I will. I will read a little bit of it. Uh, you know, I'm going to read you the epilogue. It does have an epilogue, because to me, it synthesizes what the book is about. Um, People were shocked with the ending, because it is so unexpected, not because it's gruesome or bloody or scary, but it was so it gets the reader out of nowhere. You know, I had my friends text me, girl, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. So after you read the book, the story, I decided to add a one-page epilogue, because in Letters from Young Carlos, at the end of that story, when Elder Carlos goes to heaven, people were wanting to know so much about the characters that I think, you know, that was one of the impetus for me eventually writing the sequel, because people wanted to know, well, what happened here and who went there. And so, and by the way, if there's anybody here or viewing this later who read Letters to Young Carlos, there are several characters that reappear again. Blanca, the mother, Bonita, the sister, and of course, Tulio, Carlos's best friend, is all over the place. And Tulio actually winds up moving to Mexico City and finding love and a future there. And many things happen to him. And Tulio and Carlos correspond with letters. And he has an incredible finale for because there's a stories within the stories. And Tulio's story, I wanted to make sure that he had a good ride as a character, because Tulio has a fan club. Tulio is more popular than I am, or the main character. They just love Tulio. And so he is back. And of course, Jesse, the first love, the one that initiated Carlos into sex and love way back in Douglas, is in Los Angeles, and he makes a big return. So for those of you that wanted to know what happened. So when this book finishes, Camaleon, I don't know if I would write another sequel, if I would keep this story going. Although when you read the finale, you're going to say, oh, he set me up. He's going to write another book. Right now, I say no, that I don't think I'm going to write. I'm actually working on another book, another story, completely different, but who knows, right? So here's this the epilogue. Readers often wonder when the character of Carlos knew he was gay. There would have never been such a moment. He always knew he was who he was because he belonged to a persecuted community. The better question might be, in an era when homosexuality was against the law and classified as a mental disorder, did Carlos finally realize the only gender rule was that there was no rules? That being a man or woman was whatever it meant to that person? And never to assume anyone's identity until they tell you who they are. I can't read the next paragraph because I gave away the ending, but I'll go to the next one. And this is the end and what I really feel in my heart. Queer people risk their lives for love in the hopes that one day nobody feels ashamed of who they are, nor needs to conform to someone's definition of who they should be, but is valued for who they are. May you come to fully embrace your individuality and difference. May you cherish your soul's uniqueness and allow it to guide your special destiny here. And may you see that behind the facade of your everyday life, something beautiful and eternal is happening. And that's the end of the book.
Wow. Go right to it.
I should read you a letter from Tulio. Tulio writes quite spicy letters from Mexico City. I wasn't prepared for this, but
Not too spicy.
not too spicy, I know. Well, then I have to probably pass on Tulio because they're all kind of, he's a crazy man. They also have quite a good time in San Francisco, and eventually Carlos gets a job, and he works for a cosmetics company out of San Francisco, based in San Francisco, and he is transferred to Sao Paulo, which is probably the most homophobic era in Latin America. So he went there to be a manager and help train the people. And of course, he was immediately ostracized by the macho men. And that is the final chapter of the book, the final section of the book. But the final chapter is called The Fog, and it has some very, I think you would like this. It's called The Fog. This is when he returns to San Francisco, and we have about 8 minutes left, so let me read you a few of these lines. The light of day dwindling, Carlos sat on a bench overlooking the bay at Fisherman's Wharf, listening to the foghorns wailing as the fishing boats returned to the San Francisco Bay. Squawking seagulls hovered overhead in search of a last morsel of sustenance before the darkness set in. Carlos chewed on the tip of his pen and sporadically wrote in a journal, keeping an eye on the rolling fog engulfing the city. Life is beautiful, he wrote, but unforgiving. What you see, you can never unsee. And what he saw made the boy in him a man without him even realizing it. And then he writes, that's the thing about healing, he wrote. Even if you don't want to, you heal into someone else because you couldn't survive who you were. San Francisco felt different. He reread his words slowly. He reread his words slowly, as if for the first time. As the sun began to disappear on the horizon, he clicked his pen, closed his journal, and neatly tucked it inside his briefcase. He stood by the bench, taking in the picturesque setting, hoping moments of beauty like these would soon weave themselves back into his life. People milled around the pier, families with children running, laughing. How easy life must be, not being afraid to talk about who you love. Constantly asked when you are getting married and offending every girl paraded in front of you. He made his way up the hill toward the company's apartments off Washington Square. The bells of St. Peter and Paul announced the 5 o'clock hour. He stood looking up at the bell towers, recalling the unanswered prayers of a desperate boy at Our Lady of Guadalupe in Agua Prieta. That frightened boy believed he was going to hell and begged for healing from loving other boys. He came out to God first. Even before Tulio, God knew. And God, he believed, could heal him if he just prayed hard enough. God's answer was to stay the course. Now it didn't matter.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Um, Having been born and raised in Berkeley, California, my parents met in the early 60s in San Francisco and lived on the corner of Haight and Ashbury, believe it or not, in a
Uh-huh.
little apartment.
Uh-huh.
Um, you just really evoke that time and also the legacy that continues today, the legacy of that community and that time, which is just so special and such a special moment in history.
Well, I think San Francisco is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I lived there twice, and that's why I have to include it in the book. And I mean, I could have described more things about it, but I didn't want to become too enamored with the idea of
Mhm.
San Francisco.
But the
But
fog, I love the fog so much, and
yes.
it's so representative. It's very metaphorical just to watch it roll in.
Mhm. Mhm.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Carlos before we end this evening? feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat. Well, Carlos, I am so excited to get my copy and read the book completely. And I've put a link to carlosvalenzuela.com, which is the link of Camaleon, which also has the link to Amazon.
Thank you.
And that's in the chat, so you can click on that before we end, and that'll open in your browser, and then you'll be able to save it for later. And Carlos, it's just such a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so very much for joining us this evening.
Oh, I
And
loved it. I totally loved it. And I am just up there with San Francisco is Bisbee, Arizona for me. I love Bisbee, and yeah, the fact that it was raining today, I can think about it, and it's just wonderful. I hope to go there. I like to go there around the holidays, and I hope to do it again. And thank you so much for joining me today and for listening to me ramble about my book. I would like to say that I do one of the projects, if it's okay, Allison. One of the projects that I have is doing education. I'm an old educator. I have trained more people than ever, and I am working on I'm working on a project which I call the Way of the Fairy, which is queer wisdom for everyone. I mean, I think it's time that we as a community, and I don't know if everybody here is a community, is part of the community, but we queers in the community are a treasure of information and wisdom. We've been through a lot. And I think our wisdom is good enough to be shared with everyone. And I'm working on that project, and I hope to bring it around online in the beginning of 23. And look for it. I'll let Allison know, but it is called The Way of the Fairy.
oh, I really look forward to learning more. And yes, please keep me in the loop on that. And Pamela, your comment is just wonderful. And yes, I grew up there during the 80s. So, but it was magical during my Navy time of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That's just encapsulates so much. And
And Pamela, also in the book, there is a section about the draft, the 1960s draft, when they would draft young men, and how the queer community had to respond to that, and how scary that was. There is quite a piece in there about the difficulty of that. Now that you say don't ask, don't tell, that was later. At this point in the 60s, everybody was being drafted.
interesting. Yeah, and that historical context, creating using history as the setting, exploring this narrative is, I think, is just also so important. It was such a vibrant time of social change in
It
so many
is.
ways.
It
So
is. The 60s are, I mean, I try to measure myself because it was my time, but they were really, really transcendental. I mean, women burning their bras and men their draft cards. It was happening.
that's wonderful. All right, Carlos, thank you so much, and
You
thank
very
you
much, everyone.
for coming.
Allison, God bless you. Thank you for having me. And anything that the Copper Queen Library wants or needs, just call on me, or any of you, please. I'm on Facebook, and my information is in the books for you to contact me. Feel free. I reply to everything. Okay?
Thank you. Have a
Okay.
wonderful evening. Good
Thank you
night.
very much. Bye, everyone.